You're listening to episode 75 of Present Moment. Welcome to Present Moment, Mindfulness, Practice, and Science. I'm Ted Meissner. Present Moment is a podcast with interviews, conversations, and roundtable discussions. We speak with mindfulness teachers about their newest findings published in peer-reviewed science journals, teachers about their understanding and methods as they work with students of mindfulness, authors about their books and interests, and we also speak with everyday practitioners. The website presentmomentmindfulness.com has show notes for each episode along with resource materials. Linda Lehrhaupt joins us to speak about her new podcast, Mindfulness-Based Teacher Project. Whether you're a new or experienced teacher of mindfulness, you've likely encountered situations that made you more aware of your own teaching edges. How you navigate those sensitive areas, whether they are sensitive for your participants or perhaps for you, is an opportunity for learning. Having good teaching resources is helpful, and as you're already listening to a podcast about mindfulness, I'm pleased to be able to share another in today's episode. Linda Lehrhaupt, PhD, has created the Mindfulness-Based Teacher Project to share her more than 3 decades of experience as a teacher of mindfulness-based approaches. Founder and executive director of the Institute for Mindfulness-Based Approaches in Germany, she has been leading teacher training programs in mindfulness-based stress reduction since 2001. She began training with the Center for Mindfulness in Medicine, Healthcare, and Society at the University of Massachusetts Medical School in 1993 and is certified by them to teach MBSR. She has also directed teacher training programs in Tai Chi and Qigong for more than 20 years and has received Dharma transmission as a Zen teacher in the White Plum lineage founded by Taizen Maezumi Roshi. With a degree in education and doctoral research in the study of religious rituals and traditions, she brings rich and extensive experience to this inspiring and down-to-earth podcast series to support teachers in the fields of mindfulness-based interventions, mindfulness in various contexts, mindful movement, and contemplative traditions. Our guest today is Linda Lehrhaupt. Linda, welcome to the podcast.
Yes, thank you.
Very glad that you're here. And for those who are listening at the moment, I will say that Linda and I had a wonderful conversation last week for about an hour and a half. We were planning on doing the recording, but we just had so much fun getting to know each other that we put it off a week. So today is our actual interview. So Linda, thank you so much for coming back.
Yeah, thank you.
So tell us about your background.
Yes, I'm American, but I've been living in Germany since 1983. And the reason I'm here is I did it all for love. I met a wonderful German man, my husband Norbert, in 1980. We fell in love and we kind of tossed it back and forth a couple of years where to go. And I decided I wanted to return to Europe. I had lived there 15 years before, and I really enjoyed that and also the idea of raising my daughter in Europe. And so I have been living here that long, but I'm American and I was born and raised in New York. And from my profession, I'm a teacher. I studied education and taught in secondary school for a few years after I graduated college in 1971. And then I went into adult education in 1982 when I began teaching Tai Chi and Qigong, which was originally my hobby. But when I came to Europe, I decided to make my hobby my profession in a way. And at the same time, I was finishing a doctorate. So it was really a wonderful way of integrating myself into Europe and teaching the things that I loved. I began Zen meditation in 1979 as a young woman who was facing quite a crisis in her life. My mother just died. I had a young baby. My father was completely handicapped and needed a lot of care. I didn't really know when I woke up in the morning how I would get through the day. And I read a wonderful book called Snow Leopard by Peter Matheson, where he talked about mainly about his trip in the Himalayas, but every once in a while he'd talk about Zen, and something about it caught me. So I opened up the telephone book, which one did in those days, and looked up Zen, and in fact found a Zen center in New York City and began practicing. Even though I finished my dissertation, I decided not to go on for an academic career, but to continue teaching Tai Chi and Qigong. And by that time, I was also studying quite seriously Zen with another teacher, and he gave me permission to lead introductory classes. So I was really enjoying that part of my life. I became quite ill in 1988 with very severe tinnitus, which for me was such a blow to my life. And learning to live with it and deal with it and finally really live with it rather than in spite of it really prepared me when I picked up John Kabat-Zinn's book in 1992 or 93, Full Catastrophe Living. And the moment I started reading it, I realized that I had, as I said to my husband, I found my work. Because at that point I had been teaching meditation and other things, but John's book so inspired me because it also touched my heart in terms of my own dealing with a chronic illness, which never went away, that I immediately signed up for a course for the professional training. I think I did the second professional training that they ever offered, John and Saki Sanarelli at Omega. And I came back and was fully fired and began teaching MBSR, my first class, and continued and kept in touch with the CFM and with colleagues I had met there during the professional training. I went on to do the first TDI that the CFM ever offered in 1997. And yeah, things slowly grew from there. In about 2001, we began getting requests, myself and some other colleagues that I met at that point, because in the beginning, in the 1990s, there was no MBSR in Europe, or very, very little. And slowly a little network of us got together, and anyway, to cut a long story short, we began offering the first teacher training program in mindfulness-based stress reduction in 2002. February 2002, I founded an institute called the Institute. In English, it's called the Institute for Mindfulness-Based Approaches. In German, it's called the Institut für Achtsamkeit. And it just started there. One course, 22 lovely people. And I had absolutely no idea that the Institute and the work and mindfulness-based approaches in Europe and the world, I had no idea that it would grow to the way it has today. And today I'm the executive director of the largest institute on the continent. We were founded the same year as the Center for Mindfulness Practice at the University of Wales. Very dear colleagues of mine, and it's just gone on from there. So we have programs today in 8 European countries, which is one of the things I really love. From my work, my doctoral work, where I was involved in comparative religion and studying religious ritual and tradition in different cultures, I was already familiar with moving into different cultures, but doing the work in MBSR has really developed that. And it's just such a joy to teach MBSR and train teachers in Poland or in Norway or in Austria, Ireland. There's challenges and wonderful opportunities in each country, but this cultural aspect, which by the way now is starting to get recognized more and more, that about being culturally sensitive to teaching mindfulness in different parts of the world. But we've had that right from the beginning in our work at the Institute, and that's one aspect I really enjoyed. So a rather long answer to your question. I hope I've touched upon aspects that are helpful to you and your audience. If there's anything else, please just ask.
Well, that was a terrific and rich background that you have, and I especially liked hearing this very similar background that you and I share of having taught in a particular context of a tradition and then finding mindfulness-based stress reduction and finding that, this is something that I've been looking for. This is what I want to do. So thank you very much for sharing that. So our main topic for today is that you've started a new podcast, which I'm very excited about because there aren't a lot of mindfulness-based podcasts out there. The some that are is, of course, this one, and then others that are really, they're Dharma talks. They're in the tradition or they're guided meditations, but not so much a podcast on the topic of mindfulness. So tell us about what it is that you're doing.
Well, I'd be a little bit more specific in that it's called the Mindfulness-Based Teacher Project. And the podcast is really intended to inspire, motivate, as well as provide support, including know-how, primarily to teachers of mindfulness-based approaches, specifically MBSR, MBCT, compassion trainings, and various other things that are out there that have developed over the years, growing many of them out of MBSR. Also intended for teachers of meditative body work. My own background, Tai Chi and Qigong, but also yoga and other forms, even martial arts, if they're taught with that spirit of embodiment of mindfulness and presence. And also aimed, because myself, I'm a Zen teacher as well as an MBSR teacher, to support teachers of contemplative meditation. Not only Buddhist practice, but contemplative traditions in Christianity or other traditions. And I was drawn to that, first of all, because I've been a teacher myself now since 1971, and both in the school system as well as in adult education. And I really feel the wish to support teachers beyond simply technical aspects, but really to look at the heart of teaching, and also something that we consider very important. We talk a lot about embodiment in teaching mindfulness-based approaches, but what exactly does that mean? And when you look at a lot of the material that is starting to come up about that, even some of the books, which are wonderful on one level, they're wonderful in terms of their approach, but they tend to be a bit academic. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm an academic myself, but the really heart of it, expressing it and touching people's hearts, bodies, and I felt was important to address. Of course, I don't know how many people have come through our programs. I think we've had over 1,200 people come through our MBSR training program alone in the last 16 years or 15 years. And the themes that come up again and again are often perhaps addressed in supervision or what we call mentoring. But I wanted to do it in a format that would really allow people to hear it, to see it, to touch it, to smell it, to taste it, and to really let it, be there for them in different ways. I also wanted to do it in a way that would be more intimate and allow people a chance to listen and to digest and to be present with it. I don't feel it's a Dharma talk in that sense, but there is that kind of intimacy which is also present when I am teaching, and I just felt called to do that. I also love being creative. So as you know, in my podcast stories, there's often a story around which the podcast is built. So I may tell a story, and then I will elaborate on the theme, which I think is talked about. So, for example, the first podcast, and I guess it's no accident because it's also a theme for me, is about the theme of perfectionism and how that can really inhibit us from sharing our gifts with others. Yeah? So that's a little bit how it came about. And I also wanted to use the form of speaking spontaneously. In other words, I don't prepare the talks. They're not written texts. When they're translated into a foreign language, they are. But my original giving of the talk is I simply sit down, usually in the morning, quite early in the morning, and I usually have a theme in mind. I might make a couple of notes, just in terms of looking up a quote, for example, that I might want to use. But otherwise, the talks are just given as if someone else is, or a group of people are sitting there and I'm sharing. So I think it's really about, I wanted to find a forum where I could share with others almost 45 years of experience that I've had in teaching. And there are just things that belong to teaching, whether it's teaching English and theater, which was originally my subject as a high school teacher, or teaching MBSR, they belong to the territory. And so that's a little bit the background.
What I like about the way you've chosen to do the podcast, not scripted, but just something that comes directly from your heart, is the authenticity, which really supports that intimacy that you're trying to establish.
Yeah. Intimacy, authenticity. Authenticity is a word that's used a lot by people in our training programs and other teachers, that one wants to be authentic. But what does that really mean? Yeah. It's interesting what people mean by authentic. I like, let me put it this way. A lot of words have become buzzwords, yeah, in all traditions, whatever one's doing, but there are certain words that have become buzzwords, or I might use the term, if I'm teaching in Europe or Germany, I might say have become cliches. They're used so often that we think we know what they mean. But what do they really mean? What does it mean to be authentic as a mindfulness teacher? Another buzzword, embodiment. We have to embody, it's suggested we embody the teaching. Well, what does that mean? And I really want to encourage people to take all these words that we think we know, all these suggestions for how we should teach, or what might be skillful. Yeah, that's another buzzword, skillful. For who is it skillful? And really allow ourselves to really let that be present, to be with it, and not simply all yes, yes, yeah, we would say in German, yeah. We're all going to embody, we're all going to be mindful, we're all going to be skillful. This kind of, I don't want to use that word badly. I mean, are we really, really willing to explore, I think Parker calls it the inner landscape of teaching. Yeah. He's someone who has beautifully spoken from the heart, mind, and soul of being a teacher. And I would hope with these podcasts to support and encourage people to live the question as what's his name, Rainer Maria Rilke said, yeah, really and truly to live it and not gloss over it by not keeping that question and theme really alive. Yeah, we want to move too much to smoothly embodying. And that's understandable and it's human, but maybe not really the kind of authenticity, and I'm using the word now, to keep it an open question. And truly knowing that when that's alive in us as a teacher, that is what will mostly come across to our students. There have been so many studies to show that what we say, the content, really does not get processed in teaching. What gets processed is the presence of whatever we might be teaching. That's what really communicates. So heart to heart, body to body, mind to mind. And in the middle of that, how do we do it if we're insecure or we're worried or we're fearful, or maybe we've had a bad day and the last thing we want to do is go in and teach a group of people how to be mindful when we feel completely discombobulated and feel like feel like how do you say it? Sometimes I lose words because I speak German so much. It's difficult for me to find the English word. Yeah, that we're a fake. Yeah. How can we truly then go on and lead a class when we feel I'm the most mindless, confused, upset person that is? Yeah. And do it in a way where it's open and honest, but not necessarily that we're pouring our heart out to our students, which is not exactly the right thing to do in that context.
Right. You don't want to make it about you, but still share this lived experience, because that's where the example of life happens. And we do have
That's
ups
true.
and downs.
But again, this is a cultural thing. Okay. There are cultures where you have to perhaps be even more discreet, let's say, than you might be in another culture. And I think the probably the most helpful way of doing that is when you are truly in tune, when you're truly present with whatever is there, in the sense of allowing it to be present, but at the same time knowing this is not the place to unpack what's going on. Yeah. Then we're bearing witness to our own humanity, and that can allow it to be present without it needing to intrude too much in our work, which is to lead and guide a group for that period of time.
So, Linda, what is it that you're hoping the listeners to the podcast will get from it? If that's even the right way to contextualize it, what are you hoping will happen?
Well, again, I think it's what I said before about really being willing to allow aspects of one's teaching to be open, to not get frozen into, smooth delivery, so to speak. But at the same time, as one develops competence, as one develops experience, that doesn't mean that one can't ride on that, so to speak. But what can happen is that we get so skilled sometimes that we just glide through a program or a class, and it doesn't really touch us anymore. That's what a lot of teachers talk about after they've taught 50, 60, 70 classes. Yeah. They can become so familiar with the material that it can become a bit, too glib, so to speak. How do we keep it fresh? But also, how do we I particularly also, of course, wanted to support beginning teachers, young teachers who are teaching their first or their fifth or their 10th class. You can get overwhelmed as a teacher, yeah? You can go in and do your job, but you've been overwhelmed. And what tends to happen is that there kind of comes up a screen between you and the people that you're working with, which can be for self-protection, or it can be for just trying to get through the class, but that can continue. And I wanted to support people to be able to work skillfully with the themes, which I talk about in the podcast. For example, there is one podcast called Finding Your Authentic Voice, and how we can be crippled. I know myself, because in that podcast, I tell my own story of being crippled in terms of finding my own expression, because I was so focused on trying to be like somebody else that I admired and respected, that it took me a very long time to realize that that was not really neither helpful nor nourishing to either myself or to others. And so I don't want to cut people's journey short, because there is a journey that you go on as you develop as a teacher. At the same time, really long, detours, which are helpful, they can sometimes get debilitating. And I really want to encourage and support people to continue in this work. The world needs us. I don't say that in an arrogant way, but the world truly needs people who are committed to mindfulness practice, who live it and teach it and work with it, and want to support others to find a way to come home to themselves, to ground in life, to live the gifts as well as the challenges. And teachers are the front line. We're on the front line. And in terms of really being able to bridge that between the theory and the living, we're the bridges. And we're also in a way the translators, because we began at a place where maybe we are exactly where the people who are in front of us. And now we can support others to have the courage and presence to make that journey. And I really, my heart is with teachers, of course with my students, but I have a particular soft place in my heart for teachers. And I also don't want to see mindfulness teaching become just another academic subject. Yeah. It's important that there's research. It's important, all those aspects, but I don't want to lose the connection to the heart, and also keeping it an open, living, searching, sometimes difficult, sometimes, wonderful, sometimes scary question. It's all that. It's life.
Well said. So shifting a little bit, your husband is the artist. Can you say words about him and his contribution?
Yes, he was very proud to know that maybe he would be mentioned. And I'm so thrilled that we were able to work on this project together. My husband, German, as I said, he studied art originally at the Düsseldorf Art Academy. And when he finished his studies, he was for a while working in the field as an independent artist. And then he discovered landscape architecture, and that just opened his heart. And he became a landscape architect. And for almost 25 years, he was very busy designing gardens. And now he's discovered digital painting, and he's just in love with his iPad, and he loves drawing on the iPad. And he found that it has really harnessed his creativity. It's so minimal, no paint, no paper, no nothing. And, he can just draw like crazy. And I got the idea that I wanted the podcast site to be more inspiring and beautiful. And I said, Norbert, what about your drawing a drawing for each of the podcasts? And so that's what it is. If you go on the website, you'll see that each podcast has a drawing by Norbert. And it's been a kind of a wonderful collaboration. And also, Norbert does not meditate in the classical sense. We're one of these couples who've been together for 35 years. His wife is a Zen teacher and mindfulness teacher. Nah, don't meditate. Not my thing. On the other hand, he can work in a garden for 14 hours at a time in the most tender, loving, and meticulous way. And of course, it's just a different form of mindfulness expression. So it's been a lovely thing. And I really feel that his pictures have their own meaning, but at the same time support the podcast and support people when they're looking at it. So, and he'd love to hear from you, even though he says he doesn't. He would love to have it. It's kind of a coming out for him as well. Of course, the big gardens he's done over the years is his presence, but this is, again, for him, an intimate sharing and a form of service. Yeah, I mean, what I came to realize over the years is that his practice is not formal meditation, it's service. He's built every Zendo or meditation hall I've ever taught in. He's designed it and built gardens around it. And now he's, in a way, designing the garden and landscape of the podcast series. So, yeah, that's a little bit about what's it about.
And it is beautiful work. You and I were speaking about this last week, that the illustrations in particular, they're overall style, and there is a variety for each podcast, but they're very riveting images. And so he's done truly beautiful work. And for folks who are listening to the podcast, if nothing else, even if you're not a teacher and you don't want to listen, at least go and take a look at the website, because you'll see some of these graphic images were really quite touching. And Linda, is there anything else that you wanted to share with listeners about the podcast?
Well, I hope that people will find the podcast supportive. From my heart to your heart, and from my brain to your brain, my body to your body. I truly hope it will help to support the continuing development of a teacher's sangha that not only shares know-how, but walks this path together. Yeah? And I hope that will contribute to that. And that's my intention and that's my wish.
Thank you, Linda. Our guest today, Linda Lehrhaupt. You can find out more about her work at Mindfulness-Based-Teacher-Project.org. There's dashes in between, and I've got a link to that on the episode page for this episode, as well as links to the Institute for Mindfulness, both the English and the German versions, and a couple of the books we've mentioned today. Linda, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Ted, for inviting me.
Thanks for listening. If you'd like to learn more about something you've heard in today's podcast, please come visit the website at presentmomentmindfulness.com. You'll find an entire webpage devoted to this and every episode. You can comment on the episode page and find show notes and other helpful resources for your mindfulness practice. The shakuhachi music heard on Present Moment is used by permission and through the generosity of musician Rodrigo Rodriguez. His website is linked on the Present Moment website on the About Podcast Music page. Sound editing, mixing, and mastering provided by the generosity of Anthony Dominello of StructureFromSound.com. Until next time, remember, every moment you have a choice. Make it the best you can. See you next time on Present Moment.